Hi, everyone, and welcome to the EdCollab gathering for Fall 2018. We are so happy to have you here with us this morning for what will be an exciting day. It's a free online K-12 literacy conference that we have designed and created just for you. It's our gift to the educator community literally around the world. We already have thousands of people from many countries. I think last check we were up to about 20-something countries that are already tuning in. We are so happy to share this day with all of you. Just a few announcements and a few how to get around today for those of you that this may be your very first time. And then we will move right into our exciting program and what I know you're all really excited for, this morning's opening keynote. So let me just put up on the screen here. Here are some announcements. So the first is this morning's keynote, which will be happening in just a few minutes. We are so honored to be joined by Elizabeth Acevedo, a New York Times bestselling author of The Poet X. She was the Youth National Slam Poetry winner. She also, we're talking with her briefly this morning, is in between stops on a whirlwind book tour. She was just in upstate New York, and then I think in a few days she's flying somewhere else. So we are so honored and excited to have her here with us this morning. Her opening keynote is Reading, Writing, and Bring It Your Whole Self. Then our closing this afternoon, we are also very honored and excited to have Mari Kopeny, that's Little Miss Flint, who will be in conversation with our book ambassador, Julia Torres. Mari is a youth activist in Flint, Michigan, who has taken the crisis that she and her community are in and not only experienced it, but seen it as a place where she needed to use her voice to fight for change and to make change, which she has done and continues to do in big, powerful ways. So we're very looking forward to her message and to hear from her this afternoon. Julia has already been saying what how fun and exciting and delightful their planning has been. So we hope that you'll join us at this afternoon's closing. If this is your first time or your, what are we up to, maybe 8th time that you've joined us, here's a few ways that today will go. So first of all, after this morning's keynote, there are multiple sessions which we'll remind you of across the day. If you are already on our main webpage, gathering.theeducatorcollaborative.com, there you can find a link to our agenda. You can see the full agenda for the day, and you can click on any of the sessions. One important thing to know is that this is one of the rare conferences where you don't have to duplicate yourself. You know how if you attend a conference or an ed camp, you wish you could be in 1,000 rooms all at the same time? You sort of get to do that because all of the sessions are streaming live, but then are also recorded and are left on this event page until the next one, which will happen in April. So if you are attending workshop 1, for example, but you really wish you could also hear from workshop 2 and 3, you can come back to them at any time. The way that you can communicate with our presenters and with each other across the day is using hashtag #TheEdCollabGathering. Use that in all of your tweets and in your Instagram posts. And if you want to communicate directly around one workshop that you're watching, be sure to include the workshop number. So it would look like what you can see on the bottom of your screen there on that card that you'll find on every page, hashtag the EdCollab Gathering, space, hashtag, and then the workshop number. In this case, if you were attending this one, it would be workshop number 1. By putting that in your tweet, everyone else who is following those same hashtags will be able to find it, as will the presenters. You'll be able to communicate with them there. If you're a New York State educator and you're joining us, we have a pilot program that we're starting where, as the EdCollab is a CTLE sponsor, if you are a New York State educator and you would like to earn CTLE credits from this morning, we have a tangential course. If you go to the Get Involved tab, just look for the link to that and you'll find it. It's a program that we're trying out because we know many of you are learning along with us, and we wanted to offer this for New York State educators, and perhaps it's a program we can grow in the future. So you can find more information there. Registration is open until the end of October, which is also the due date for the assignment for the course. There are many other ways that you can learn along with us here at the EdCollab. You can find all of that at theeducatorcollaborative.com. Or if you go to the pre-session page, there's a recorded pre-session that I and Shauna Coppola did together about some of the online learning opportunities this year. So you also can find our services guide there. And there's lots more ways you can learn with us. Some are for fee, some are free like today. So we hope you'll join us. One of those is our study series. It's an annual 12 sessions. They're 1 hour each. You can view them live. That's the best way to interact with presenters. And then they are recorded through June 30th each year. If you register for a seat, you then can watch that session, both the live and the recording session, with anyone else in your entire school building anytime you would like. You just can put it up on a screen or have them huddle around your computer. New this year, every one of our study series seats, you can add additional virtual logins for $5 each. So if you would like to actually share login privileges with others at your school, so they aren't just huddled around your computer, but they watch it with you, you can see them there. We are so excited about this year's study series. The pre-session will go much more in depth around all of them, but just a few things to say. We are beginning the year with the session. It's coming up quickly, October 17th, Equity Literacy for Transformation. And our entire year is really built around thinking about the practices of literacy, how those can support equity, study, looking at social justice, considering ways that you are working through identity, and supporting a variety of identities in your school, in the literature that you choose. We're really looking forward to what we feel will be a powerful year, so we hope that you can join us. In addition, we have our 3 virtual think tanks for this year. Those are a more rigorous way to learn along with us. Each of these cohorts, there's one for K-6, one for 512, and then one for leaders and coaches. Each of them allows you to work in a small, intimate group that meets online. They're always an international group, so you get to meet with educators from all over the world, and you'll work with the leaders that you can see here on a variety of topics. They meet for 5 sessions, and each of those registrations includes an entire year study series that you can share with colleagues at your schools. So you can learn more about that on our website or at the link down there, learning.theeducatorcollaborative.com. It's one of the many ways to learn with us. So this brings us to, we're doing a giveaway. So last April, we gave away 1 study series session from the previous year, and it was a big hit, and we really enjoyed having you join us on that day. So throughout the day today, if you follow us on Instagram, we're the Ed Collab, and post anything you'd like using the hashtag the Ed Collab Gathering. After today, we will choose up to 10 random winners that will receive a free seat for our very first study series. That seat will allow you to watch live on October 17th at 6 p.m. Eastern, or to watch the recording anytime through June 30th with any and everyone at your school as many times as you'd like. So if you follow us on Instagram, the Ed Collab, and share any post today, you could share posts of yourself doing PD in your PJs if you're watching in your pajamas today, or if you're watching with a group. We know several schools are having group viewing parties today, so you could do that. You could also just share quotes from today, or really anything you'd like. Please join us there. Share a post, tag at hashtag the Ed Collab Gathering, and we'll choose after today. You'll also find out there. If you'd like more information on this drawing, you can find it on the homepage at the very bottom of our homepage of today's gathering. So I'd like to start today acknowledging a kind of place and time that we're in right now in the United States, but we know this is something that we can see across the world, and certainly news that's happening here, we know many of you are following, but it's not something that's just for the United States. When we believe survivors, when we believe the voices of people who are speaking up, we move ourselves forward. And what's important for us to recognize is that our education system is not separate from the concerns around violence and assault that we've been hearing about through the Me Too movement. Instead, our education system is certainly at the center of it. From what should be a simple act of empathy, of belief, of listening to a child or an adult, the ability to have us as a school system from K-12 through college to open up our arms and listen, and to say this is a space to share, The stories that we hear and the experiences that some of you may have experienced, some of us may have experienced, and certainly ones that we're reading and listening to, are often stories of feeling shut out from school, of events that happened when people were children or are still children now, and not feeling that their school, whether it's elementary or middle or high or college or university, is there to listen and accept and protect. We know in K-12 that we're mandated reporters, and statistically, many of us, including myself, have had to report. But too many times, these stories are telling us that we're not offering the steps before the report. We're not making the spaces that we're in open for people to feel like they can share and be heard and be protected. Our system is in crisis. Our system is in crisis if we can't teach and share and write and listen in a way that feels safe. Our system is in crisis if we can't teach and read and write and share in a way that doesn't develop toxic masculinity, shame, fear of listening to others, of believing others, hearing their stories, being innocent. Change has been led by leaders, by survivors, and by accomplices. Tarana Burke's founding of the Me Too movement, long before celebrities made this a part of their movement. Her voice around Me Too and then the amplification that happened around it has made it something that outside of our schools, at least, the public is engaging in. And as we've seen even this week here in the United States, is still not capable of fully handling. But there's some change. But it's on us to look at our home, our schools, to say, how do we become a part of that change too? Because the reality we need to believe is that we haven't even come close to fixing it yet. But the other reality we can and should believe is that we can. We can find a way to help boys and girls and gender nonconforming individuals feel like not only are they in a safe place, but that they can be themselves and that they don't have to be only one way. Today, we have an incredible array of educators and authors and activists who are sharing the ways that they are moving and producing change in instruction, in their lives, in the lives of others. I challenge you, especially if you're in a group today, to think, where are places that we have not gone far enough, where we believe we've done work that truly we have not yet? So to start off today, it is with a great honor and a welcome back. We have Elizabeth Acevedo who will be joining us. As I mentioned earlier, Elizabeth is the New York Times bestselling author of The Poet X, an incredible novel in verse, which I've now read again over the past few days to prepare for today, and I'm blown away yet again. And just before we bring her on, one thing to say is that our gathering is free. You're all here because you just chose to be, and we welcome you, and you didn't have to register, you don't have to pay anything. What we invite you to do during every gathering is to pay the joy that you feel forward. So Elizabeth will speak just a little to her chosen charity of the day, which you can find on our charity tab, is the Brotherhood and Sister Soul, a New York City-based organization that Elizabeth credits with being there for her and for many other children here in our city. In addition, one of our presenters, Dana Stakoyak, was not able to join us today. She lives in Wilmington, North Carolina, one of the communities that's been affected by the recent hurricane. So she suggested that you may want to donate to Nourish NC. It's an organization that feeds children in North Carolina. We also suggest that you may want to pay the joy forward, and what you would have paid for coffee or a meal or something else, you may donate to RAIN, the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, which over this past week has had I think it was a 217% spike in people calling their network. So there are many ways that you can pay today's joy forward. One other thing just to add before we start is that during the end of this morning's session, Elizabeth will be joined by Dr. Carla España, a fellow of the Educator Collaborative, for Q&A. If during this session there's some questions that you have that you'd like Carla to think about too, you can just use hashtag the EdCollab Gathering, and she'll be able to see your questions, and some of them might be added into their Q&A session as well. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Elizabeth Acevedo. Good morning, Elizabeth.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. And thank you so much for being here with us.
I'm excited to be here with you all. I'm going to be doing a couple of things this morning. I'm going to say some poems. I'm going to tell some stories. And I'm going to give what I think are 3 pieces of advice that I wish I had kept in mind when I was in the classroom. And I can't wait to be in conversation with Carla and get into some of the nitty-gritty questions. But my keynote is really focused on what does it mean to accept a whole child into the room? And what are the different ways that we can do that using writing, using literature, and using our own empathy as educators. And I'm going to start off with a quick little story. So I got my master's in fine arts from the University of Maryland. And it was a fascinating experience for me. It was a cohort of about 15 students, which is incredibly small. That meant that there were maybe 9 students in every course, right? And in a creative writing workshop, that can be a really intimate space. And I remember that I was the only person of Afro descent. So I was often the darkest person in the room and often the one looked to whenever we were having race conversations. I was the only person of Latinx descent who was writing about that experience. And so I often had to come into the space feeling like I had to explain parts of myself that people did not understand. And I was the only person who was writing about being from a major city. I was one of 2 students from New York. And a lot of my writing had to do with that. And so I would come to class with all these like hood morenita poems that I would turn in. And all of the Spanish words would be circled. And the slang would have question marks. And I was often called, well, we don't know how to workshop this because it's a slam poem, right? That the work that I was doing was not considered the kind of work that the program knew how to handle. And I remember this one moment that really made me realize that I might have a different experience than I thought I would, and then the rest of my classmates, when my professor came to class. And I got to tell you all, right, like as an aside, he was an old school dude, right? Like when you think of like the quintessential professor, like long ass beard, Walt Whitman in the face, right? Like the kind of person who has a really melodious voice. So anytime he talks, you want to lean in. And then he would say something real problematic and you're like, lean all the way back, right? Like that kind of professor. And so he comes to class and he's like, I just read the most amazing poem about deer. And I have no beef with deer, right? I think like venison is amazing. I'm not hating on anybody's wildlife. I know we're coming from all over the world. Like Bambi's a great movie. I have no problem with deer. But I think that we live in a culture where our literature has certain symbols that we uphold as this is what you can write about and read about, and this is what you can't, right? And in that moment, I just thought, wow, how many poems have I had to read in my life about flowers and clouds and deer? And for 2.5 hours, this professor goes on and on about this deep poem. Then he goes one step further. He says, I want everybody in the classroom to write an animal ode. And the English teachers in the room might know that an ode is a praise poem. It's a poem that takes something really simple and elevates it to a greater height, like Neruda's Ode to the Artichokes or Ode to the Socks, which take this really domestic symbol and make it a political poem by focusing on the smallest, simplest thing in a household, right? And so my professor goes to one classmate. He's like, what would you write about? And my classmate says, well, like Elizabeth Bishop, I would write about the blackbird. Which I'm like, okay, not the most creative answer, right? 13 Ways How to See a Blackbird. Pretty famous poem. I feel like we've seen the blackbird enough times. He goes to another classmate, and my classmate goes, well, I would write about sea anemones. And I'm Googling on this table, like, what the heck is a sea anemone? How many N's are in anemones, right? Like, I'm like, that's a little too original. And then my professor gets to me. And growing up in New York City, there's one creature we know really well. And the one piece of writing advice you always get is write what you know. And so I puff up my chest and I'm like, well, I would write about rats. And I'm excited, y'all. I'm like, this is a good answer, right? I feel like I'm on Family Feud. Like, yes, good answer. And I felt in that moment, like I honed in on a thing that felt natural, that felt real, and that I knew I could write about. And my professor looked at me and said, rats are not noble enough creatures for a poem. Liz, I think you need more experiences. Rats are not noble enough creatures for a poem. Liz, I think you need more experiences, right? That I just want to repeat that because I feel like those two clauses have so much packed into them. And I came into my MFA having been an educator, having been an 8th grade English teacher, and thinking through what does it mean to automatically categorize certain symbols as having noble qualities. Both my parents are from the Dominican Republic, the first place colonized in the Western Hemisphere. The folks who colonized the Dominican Republic were nobility, right? That I have never aspired to be noble. That is not one of the things that I consider when I am creating literature, when I'm writing, when I'm reading. That's not what I look for. And that I know that maybe this professor meant that nobleness is not something the rat has, this animal that scurries and steals and is found on ships and carries disease, right? Like that, maybe that's what he meant. But when a child has certain experiences, when a person has certain experiences that they refer to as this is what I know of this world, and maybe I've seen a different side of this, what happens when you say as like a all right rule, right? Like this is not a thing we can write about because it doesn't fit my standard of what a poem can be. But then that certain part, maybe you need more experiences. As if this professor who had known me for a handful of weeks had any sense about the experiences I had had in my life. And so I want to bookmark those two phrases because I'm going to come back to that. But first I want to say, I did end up writing the Rat Ode, right? It was my official clap back to that professor because I realized that just because he was not my reader did not mean I did not have a reader. And I want to share that poem with you all because I think it kind of sets this tone for the kind of educator I hope to be, the kind of writer I hope to be, and the kind of energy that I consider carrying throughout the world, right? That those of us who were made to feel small or ugly or different need an anthem of how do you say the rats in the room like deserve poetry too. And so this is for us. Because you are not the admired nightingale, because you are not the noble doe, because you are not the picturesque ermine, armadillo, or bat. They have been written and I don't know their song the way I know you're scuttling between walls. The scent of your collapsed corpse rotting beneath floorboards. Your frantic squeal as you pull at your own fur from glue traps, ripping flesh from skin in an attempt to survive. Because in July of 97, you birthed a legion on 109th, swarmed from behind the dumpsters, made our streets infamous for something other than crack. Shoot, we nicknamed you Cat Killer, raced with you through open hydrants, squeaked like you when Siete blasted aluminum back into your brethren's skull. The sound slapped down dominoes. You reigned that summer rat. And even when they sent exterminators, half dead and on fire, you pushed on. Because even though you are an inelegant, simple, mammal bottom feeder, always freaking famished little ugly thing who feasts on what crumbs fall from the corners of our mouths, you live uncuddled, uncoddled, can't be bought at Petco and fed to fat snakes because you are not the maze rat of labs, pale, pretty-eyed, trained. You raise yourself, sharp fang, clawed, scarred, patched dark because of this. He should love you. But look at the beast, the poet tells me. The table is already full. And rat, you are not a right-worthy thing. Every time they say that, take your gutter, your dirt coat, filth this page, rat. Scrape your underbelly against street concrete. You better squeak and raise the whole world, rat. Let loose a plague of words, rat, and remind them that you, that we are worthy of every poem. Here. I gotta say that I've never shared that piece or any piece via Skype or video or any of this thing. So I'm a little bit nervous that like that might not have come across. But I did wanna bring that into the room. I don't know how we talk about how do we use literature and language in the room of accepting people for everything they bring. And then, being too scared to bring my whole self. And so I want to make that as an offering, right? What does it mean to write your rats? What does it mean to let the rats into the room? What does it mean to give students permission to bring even the smallest, ugliest parts of themselves into this space? I loved what Chris was saying about, when we think about people stepping forward and telling their story, so often we consider that after a thing has happened. What would it be if we had an education system that created spaces to tap into what were young people feeling before an event occurred? So that trust was already there, the lines of communication was already there, and students already felt like they could somehow, some way give those little pieces of themselves that they often hide from school because they're too scared to be vulnerable in front of us. They're too scared to be fully human because they've taught themselves the student looks and acts like this. I think so often as educators, we come into a space and we think we are pouring into the child, as if the child comes to us an empty vessel, without realizing that so often young people have so much information with them. They have a knowledge base that maybe isn't necessarily academic, but they have it. And they don't know that there's a space for that I was a poet. I was a young poet growing up, and very few teachers knew that about me because there wasn't space to bring that into the room. I think about the students we have who are artists or who are amazing gamers or who are amazing athletes, but maybe not in the traditional sense. And where do we create the space for them to feel like they are not coming to us with a deficit? They're not coming to us without knowing, without having already their own, like I said before, knowledge base. And for me, I think so often about, you need more experiences, because that professor said that and it was jarring for me. But I think as an educator, I probably said that to a student at one point. I probably felt like, oh, you're so young, you don't even know how much world is left. You haven't even lived yet. Like, you have no sense of what's happening. And then I would learn my students' stories, often from the guidance counselor, not from them, because they were still too scared to say anything. They did not feel like they could share certain information, and they were ashamed and they were embarrassed. And even the ones I had good relationships with would not tell me, I'm homeless, my father isn't around, my mother this, that, and the third. I grew up in this kind of environment. These are the things I have to carry in my body when I come into school, right? This is the information I have and the things that I know that you will never have experienced. And I didn't know that. And so how often do we make assumptions? And where can we create pockets, right? Where we ask our students from the first day of class, what's an expertise that you have? What's something you know really well? And really have them think about and mind that and come into the space empowered that they know something really well. And so those students that struggle in class, that maybe aren't great at math or aren't great at English or don't really get history or social studies, do feel affirmed, but I do know this thing well. And then how can we as the educator connect those things with what we are teaching to ensure that the student feels like they are not separate from what they do in the classroom, that who they are at home, who they are outside, who they are with their friends is also welcome in the space, right? And I think Carla and I will be talking more about how to bring certain things like poetry and literature as an opening for students, but just like, when do we create those pockets for students to tell us about themselves and feel like we are not the only teacher in the room. They too have something that they could share with us. And so my first point today is just thinking about, what are the level of knowledges that our students bring in? How do we honor that? This is just a reminder for teachers, because often I think these conferences, even if they're online, are reminders of what we can do and what we need to do better. And we don't always know how to track what are the things that we can't quantify that we are actually doing really well. And I want to share a story with you all about one of my teachers. Last year, I got to do this keynote with Phil Bildner, who was my 6th and 8th grade English teacher, who you all may know as being a middle grade author. And I was lucky enough to know him as Phil. I went to a school where we called our teachers by their first names. And so this was Phil, who was my beloved middle school teacher, who put the best books in my hand, who created this amazing chart of all the books students had read. And I remember in 6th grade reading 84 books, and how how joyous I was every time Phil put up a sticker with a book that I had read, right? And he really honored that I was a huge reader and gave me that space to like feel proud as a reader. He also was really great about honoring my writing. And I'm gonna show you all what I mean. And so I remember being in 6th grade, and let me see if I can, bear with me, y'all. I'm not tech savvy and I'm trying to screen share. Oh no, I think I lost it. Wait 1 second. And so I just want to share with you all this this notebook I have, where I have a clip of Phil writing in my notebook and how much it meant to me at the time to see that. And so let me see if I can pull it up.
Elizabeth, while you're looking, I will just say, and this has never happened before, in all the years we've done gatherings, but my mom just texted me from Wisconsin to say that the Rats poem, she's like crying at home. I got a text from my mom because of you, so thank you. Hi, Mom.
Yeah, I just have to say that's one of my favorite compliments when people say they cried about rats, and I'm like, yes, my job here is accomplished if that is what we
and
consider.
that professor missed the fact that they're noble.
Right. Okay, I think I got it together, y'all. I'm so sorry about that. And I'm also going to go ahead and do this correctly. Put this into a slideshow. All right, can you all see that? I'm going to assume that's a yes. So this is Phil saying, I have this poem, and then you might see this little writing at the bottom. It says, "This is beautiful. Keep writing. Does your poem have a title?" He was really big on titles, and at the time I didn't know why. Now I'm like, yes, thank you for emphasizing things should have names. Maybe in the next poem you can describe why the person is so sad. And so this was a poem that I wrote that was clearly one that was a little bit emotional, that was a little bit angsty. And Phil would just create small spaces and small ways to say, okay, well, why? Like, why is this happening? Why do you feel this way? And how do I kind of learn through your writing? And these would be journals. These were journals that we would do once a week. And they weren't necessarily things we shared in class, but just like little prompts that he would give that we would be able to write about. And he would kind of be able to keep a pulse on the class through that. One of the things that Phil also did, which was incredible as an English teacher, was encourage students to write to authors, which I remember being 12 and like, why would I write to an author? They're never going to write back. Like, this doesn't matter. And I wrote to Lori Halse Anderson. And she sent me a manuscript of the early pages of Fever, what ended up being Fever. I have this stack of pages that I have to this day because I wrote to her. And because she's like, well, here's this reader who is clearly fascinated by my work. And, and she let me read this very early manuscript and give her feedback. And so I learned, oh, look at this. Sometimes writers care my opinion and what I have to say, right? But there was one moment and one writer I wrote to that I think fundamentally changed what I consider who I was. And the fact that this happened at 12, I think really shows the ways that we can give our students gifts that we don't even know that we're handing to them. So let me go back to this PowerPoint and show you all what I mean. So this is the book Heaven by Angela Johnson. I read this book and absolutely loved it. It's the story of a young woman, Marley Carroll, who lives in Heaven, Ohio, and she finds out that she is adopted, that the people who she thought were her parents are actually her aunt and uncle, and that her family is a lot more complicated than she imagined. What's even more interesting, right, is that there was this character named Bobby, and he was a teen father, and he had a daughter. And he was a character who I was really moved by. I remember seeing Bobby and wanting to know more about him, wanting to know more about this character. So I took Phil's advice and I wrote to Angela Johnson. And a couple years later, the book comes out, the first part last. And I know some of you are thinking like, all right, Liz, but she probably already had that written. And knowing what I know now about the writing process, I'm like, yeah, she probably had this way before I wrote her this letter already set up. But then I saw the dedication. And the dedication to the book, the first part last, reads, for Elizabeth Acevedo and the students, sorry, it's too small on my screen, but for Elizabeth Acevedo and the rest of the students in the 1999-2000 sixth grade class at the Manhattan School for Children. And that to me was incredible, right? That this teacher who told me your writing matters, and who you are matters, and what you bring into a space matters, and what you tell other people matters, encouraged me to write this note. And now I was getting this dedication. And this was the first time I had ever seen my name in print, right? That when you're 13, 14 and you see something dedicated to you, that can be so thrilling. And I liked seeing my name in print. And what I realized was I had an idea. I had an idea about a story. And then that idea manifested into a book. And my ideas mattered. And what I believed and what I thought was enough to make art. And so often I meet young people and they say, I don't have anything to write. I don't have any ideas. I don't have any stories that matter. And what happens when you slowly push and slowly encourage young people to lean into the ideas that they have, even if they're small, that they may not be big at first, but just what's a character you think is interesting? What's a notion you have? What's a thought about mathematics you've had that maybe you haven't seen? Or what's a way that you would teach it? That just giving those little prompts, oftentimes we don't know what they might manifest into. I had a student reach out to me this week on Instagram, of all places. He sends me this message. He's like, hey, I don't know if you remember me. It's Franklin. And I mean, he's grown now, right? When I had him in my classroom, he was 13. And now I'm looking at him and he's like 20. And I'm just like, oh my goodness. Like, yes, Franklin, hi. It's so good to hear from you. He's like, I just want to tell you, I don't know if you remember this, but one day you came to class and you said you read a book and that it made you think of me. And I don't know how you knew I would love that book, but the fact that you thought of me and then I read it and loved it, it felt like you really knew me and cared. And I never forgot that. And that blew me away, right? That just this student feeling like, I know you, or I might know that this is the kind of book you would like, was enough for this student to carry with them for years. Right. And I remember giving Franklin that book. And I remember he came the next day and he handed it to me and I thought he didn't like it. And I'm like, what happened? He's like, I finished it and I cried 3 times. Right. And like the courage of this young man, like being able to admit his vulnerability because of this connection we were able to create that was not in the classroom. Right. That was not necessarily a lesson that I was teaching, but was just my being aware of this kid may not be a reader. I can't figure out what he likes. I know he's super bright. Let me just keep throwing things at him that I think might touch home and that mattered. And I think so often as educators, you know, the fruits of our labor come decades later, right? But just a reminder that they do arrive and that we are doing the work. And so I want to just keep encouraging us to do that. And I want to just show you one last screen, and then I'm going to attempt not to do this anymore because tech is crazy. When I wrote the Poet X, some of you may know that the dedication to the Poet X is to Catherine Bolaños and my students at Buck Lodge Middle School and all the little sisters yearning to see themselves. This is for you, right? That for me, it was pivotal to be able to use this dedication and return the favor of what Angela Johnson had done for me. That when she gave me that dedication, I knew what it meant to to feel like you were enough to be printed, right? Like that your story mattered and your idea mattered and your name mattered. And so for me to put my student's name, to put the school, to say, I learned from you was pivotal. It was a pivotal moment. And so I hope that someone in that class, I hope that Catherine, I hope that someone sees that and realize that the idea they gave me is something that now they have enough ideas to carry and write about too. And that I think this is what we do as educators. We plant these seeds and then we hope for the absolute best. And I do think our students carry those lessons. And we get frustrated on the day-to-day and our lesson plans fail and 3 out of 4 classes don't go well. And we get really excited about how to teach a thing. And then we go and we fall flat on our faces and we're like, I'm never gonna do something creative again. But that those small moments where we connect to students, where we think we failed, and yet when we come with love and empathy and generosity, we have no idea what that impact will be. And so I just want to keep encouraging you all to be open to that impact. I'm going to tell you one last story and then we're going to jump into the Q&A. And this is not really a story. This is just my being mindful. I was in Illinois this week and I was in I did an event at a library and several teachers came. It was for Urbana-Champaign-Urbana was having a festival called the Pygmalion Festival, and I was the opener as a poet. And the teacher raised her hand and she said, you know, as a white woman coming into a space where a lot of my students are not white, how do I ensure, or what do I need to keep in mind to be the best educator possible, right? And that I think this is a lesson that I would, of course, say to white folks in the classroom, but I would also say it to all of us in the classroom. We are not saviors, right? We are not saviors, and we need to check our privilege at the door. That there was so many times when I wanted to walk into the room, and I've taught at detention centers before, and I was lucky enough never to be someone who was put in a juvenile detention center, and I felt like that kind of made me like, look, I'm the example of what you can be if you like get your stuff together, and like how horrible perspective that was, because it wasn't meeting my students where they were at. It was a number to call them and say we're having problems there. That's the case. But otherwise, just try rebooting the modem and see if that helps. Sorry. All right, I'm back. Rewinding. I really had to struggle through, like, Liz, this is not your place. Like, you meet students where they're at. You ensure that students feel like they are powerful in their own stories, regardless of what space you are in. And so I want to close out with a last little short poem. I would go in weekly to a detention center in DC, and I would do creative writing workshops with young women. And they were from the ages of 9 to 19, right? And a range of young people. And there for many different reasons. And I didn't always know the reason. I knew that I would go in every Monday, and every Monday they're like, the poetry lady's here again, right? Like, and they would be upset to see me, which is like, it's already like such a difficult facility to go into, and it's emotionally draining. And then like the people you're supposed to work with don't want to see you. But at the end of every class, they would always ask me like, when are you coming back? And they would share their poems and they would be so excited. And I'm like, literally every Monday, y'all, like like this is not a new thing. But we had to work through that moment of they never wanted to see me because of what they were carrying. But then by the end of the class, you know, they couldn't wait to do this again because there was something freeing in the process of writing. There was something freeing in someone who saw them outside of the daily experiences they had in jail, and who saw them as young people with stories. And this was a poem that I wrote to remind myself on the worst days of teaching what it was that I felt my job is. And so I want to just offer it to you all to close out before I begin speaking with Carla. When the girl at the detention center asks you again, why we gotta write these damn poems anyways? Fold back the army knife of your tongue. This is not a place to create more bruises. Teaching creative writing is like convincing skin to graft itself after being wounded. So we should not teach and harm. They must be mutually exclusive. Remember, these are Black and brown girls in America. There is hurt here. inherited or otherwise, and trauma is a tapeworm growing in the gut until it gets so big you have to reach into your throat and pull it out from between your smile. Remember, teaching is not community service. Remember, teaching is not an automatic pass to calling yourself an activist. Remember, you are not here to save lives. We are all just working on our own mosaic of aches. So when the girl at the detention center asks you again, why we gotta write these damn poems anyways? Tell her, we write to remind ourselves we are still here and that we can still heal. Thank you all. It's been so exciting to speak with you this morning. I can't wait to get to your questions. Carla, I would love to engage with you now. I know you have some amazing questions for me, and so excited to bring an expert into the room.
Wow, I think we all need to take a moment. So I'm just going to take a moment after that and really just want to thank you. That was beautiful for you to share your own experiences from being in the classroom to being in this position as an instructor and giving these workshops. From that line you just delivered where you said we are all just working right on our mosaic of aches. And the real purpose of this writing about, you know, putting ourselves out there and revealing our experiences. And we're just saying, you said, like, we are still here. This is such important life work. And I believe one of the questions I'd love for you to address is how do we make more room for this to happen in schools where they have mandated curriculum, and maybe they say there's no space, we don't have a poetry unit. So how can we make more space across the school day and maybe across the school year for poetry?
Right. I've been lucky enough to come into a lot of schools and be able to do the work of bringing poems into the classroom and doing a lot of school-wide assemblies. And then, you know, there's a lot of different kinds of teachers. Sometimes it's a math teacher who has a super big passion for poetry or for bringing in literature and can't figure out, how do I bring this in? And I think I love thinking of creative ways, right? If you are teaching the periodic elements, what does it mean to assign persona poems, right? And like, tell me the qualities of iron and write me a quick ode of what iron would do, or a persona poem. If iron were to speak, what would iron say? And these are just funny, quirky ways, but it's a way to have the student not just memorize, but think creatively about a thing. What does it mean to have them present that? And then these students are like doing spoken word poems about like the periodic tables, which I think would be an incredible slam, right? but that's just one quick little way to maybe present the information differently and to offer to them a way to bring that creative experience that they might have into the space, or just learn the material from a different angle. I think social studies is such a rich field for bringing in poetry, right? That if you are teaching the Civil War, how can you look at poems that were written in the Victorian era to speak to that? How do you look at what was happening in England and all the abolitionists there who were writing poetry as a way to say, we have to support the abolitionists in the United States? How do you think about the free Black folks in the United States who were traveling all over the country, and the orality that they were delivering, speaking about their experiences, which were often poems, right? And how is that said alongside or presented alongside the nonfiction? And I think even in English courses, right, we probably have one poetry unit, and then everything else we're doing nonfiction, or we're thinking about all these other aspects of writing, context clues. And I mean, I just remember being in the classroom and thinking, I have 3 weeks to talk about poetry, and I have no idea how to just narrow it down. And I would bring poetry in surprising ways. Sometimes the do now was a response to a poem. Sometimes the do now was, you know, in a free write, tell me one thing that you wish I knew about you, right? Or I would give, you know, one assignment this week. You can pick any prompt you want, write a poem responding to XYZ. Right? And just giving them choice, right? Like, I'm never going to tell a student, you know, tell me something your mother doesn't know, which I think is a really cool prompt. And students often write great things, but it can also be really intimidating. But what are 3 prompts that an English teacher could give? This is not graded. This is just a journal that maybe a student keeps that you check and see that they're writing. but that just gives the student the freedom of being able to express, right? I remember, and this was because I was not a great math student, I would write poems for math class. Like, it was my kind of effort to be like, look, I really am good at something else. And like, I want you to see that. And I had this teacher, Bob DeLulo, I'll never forget, Bob DeLulo would take these poems and he would be like, okay, I'll give you extra credit. You still have to do the work. You still have to do well on the exams, but I will accept that this part of you is trying to process the material. And so I would write these, metaphors about asymptotes and like parabolas and how we are arcs. Like, I would try my best to like internalize and interpret. And I had this teacher who was open to, okay, if this is what you're going to bring in, you still got to get the material, but I'm open to seeing this, right? Some quick ways.
No, I love that. I love that idea of like being open and being kind of like being subversive, being really creative and working against like the common narrative of what instruction should look like. So thank you. You addressed a little bit, and I was thinking about how to facilitate the writing process for our own students who might be jaded already with adults not hearing them out. I mean, I feel like you gave a few of the examples right now. Any others that you want to add on to that, especially if you've seen, and I think you discussed at the end of your keynote about that resistance. So maybe how you work through that resistance.
Yeah. I mean, I find that often the best teachers are the other students, right? That I'll do workshops sometimes and I'll say, I'm not even going to look at this. Like, what I want you to do is pair with a group of 2 other students and share your free write and see how that goes, and then take the feedback. And this is just in one session, right? They write a quick free write, they'll share with one another, they'll get, glows and grows. So what are some things that happened well? What are some things that you need to work on? And then I'll have students nominate each other. What was something you heard today that you thought was really powerful? And they'll say, Catherine did an amazing poem. Melissa did this, right? Tom did that. And then I'll ask those students, like, do you want to share that piece? But just that moment of validation of them looking at one another's work and creating a criteria of what is powerful, of what is clear, of what is effective. And then that moment of, oh, my classmate has now said that this work deserves to be heard. Right. And if you create, I think, enough of those opportunities, sometimes it's the students that you don't know have amazing stories or who are incredible writers that get pushed to the forefront, and other students will do that. And they may not show the poem to you. Maybe it's too revealing, or they may not share certain things with you. But when you create that space for them to talk with one another, which they're a lot more familiar with doing, and you kind of put the onus on them to tell me who you think should be the group's representative, or what do you think is a poem that might need to be in the space, I think it makes them brave. It makes them brave. Like, 2 people have already heard it and given it a stamp, so maybe I could share this with other folks. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And I was also thinking about in the Poet X, your Mira Muchacha poem in the beginning. Oh, it got all of us. I was teaching in a teacher preparation program in the spring semester. And so a lot of the teachers use that as their launching pad. And we use the strategy of borrowing a line. So we started with the first one. And we all thought of like, what's a line that our family says to us a lot, our family member. And then so we borrowed your first one and last one. And I was thinking, any other kind of like, give us an inside view into your own writing process. Like, how do you, go about doing this amazing work?
Oh, craft. I love this. With the Poet X, a lot of folks don't know, I started writing this when I was an 8th grade English teacher in 2012. And I didn't know how to do it, right? Like, I didn't know how to write a novel in verse. There's no how to write a novel in verse. There was no course on writing the novel in verse. And so I stepped away from it after 40 pages because I couldn't figure out how to do it. And I wrote 2 novels in prose that never saw the light of day, that were incredibly bad. They were not good writing, but they taught me plotting, and they taught me narrative, and they taught me how to see a project through. And then I came back to X, and with X, it was more about, how do I hone in on the human experience, the emotional truth of this character's story? And that I think that whenever we're writing, that is what we're trying to hone in on. Especially with young people, they often come with cool ideas, right? And within the slam community, I have this cool idea, writing a persona like poem from like an M&M bag and like all the things it carries. And I'm like, that's cool, but what is the depth of that, right? And that when you speak about emotional truth, like, what is the truth of that? Not fact necessarily, but what is the thing that makes this human that you would want someone else to see or connect to? And when prompts come from that, it changes, right? Because then it wasn't my selling, oh, it's a cool story to write about, you know, poetry slams and a young woman who finds poetry slams. When I then looked at what are the things this young woman has to grapple with, and what are the truths of her story? What does it mean to have men look at her? What is that? How do I write about that? What does it mean to have a difficult relationship with her mother? And where's the tension of that? Oh, okay, religion can be a tension for that. That's a truth that I know. When I looked at that, it broadened what was possible. And it made for me moments of surprise, right? Where, well, okay, when I talked earlier about students don't show themselves, what if she writes a draft that is her draft, that is her truthful answer to a prompt, and then she turns in something completely different? And we can visibly see what she hides and what she shows others, right? And that to me just felt honest. And it felt like an honest way to do that. And so when I think about writing, I always just so hit in on what is the human experience that you are trying to write about, right? And how do you get at it in a way that is clear? And so those are the kind of prompts, like anything that does that, I feel like is gonna elicit good work.
And can you tell us a little bit about, because you're talking about the human experience, about how you use your authentic language practices in your writing? And then before we go, after that, you have to tell us about With the Fire on High, because that cover and that book, I'm so excited. So go ahead.
Okay, we're gonna do many things.
We're gonna do it.
We're gonna do it. I if you've read X, you know that Spanish is not italicized. You know that there's a lot of colloquialisms. You're going to see that with The Fire on High as well. I do not believe in language othering folks. I do not italicize in my head when I speak Spanish. I do not italicize when I text my mother, when I speak to my parents. And I think there are so many young people who, when they see it italicized, they feel like, well, this book wasn't written for me in mind, right? Because the language that I speak that is native to me is being italicized, as if to say, like, this is not your language, reader. And that when I'm writing, the young person I have in mind, at least on the onset, is a very particular young person, right? And that young person might speak Spanish. And I don't want a young person reading to ever think this book was not written with them in mind. And so, I also believe in honoring the intellect of readers, that you can come to the page and look things up if you don't get it. My entire life, I've had to look things up when I didn't understand. I love Little House on the Prairie. I love Babysitter's Club. I love all of these books. And there were a lot of times that I did not know what was happening, because there was a vocabulary and a vernacular that was outside of my own. And I looked it up and I asked questions, and I became a stronger reader because of it. And I trust that my readers who maybe encounter a phrase that is slang or is AAVE or is Spanish, I trust them to either use context or to do research, right? And I fundamentally believe that we have to be mindful of what we say is the language of young people, and that when I do workshops, I let young people write in whatever language they want, and I let them express themselves in whatever language they want, because I don't know how we tell folks to write their honest story and then confine how that story is told. With The Fire on High does that as well. The cover was revealed. It's set in Philadelphia, a teen mom. It's like Water for Chocolate in the hood. So her food has magic. And she is someone who is trying to figure out, how can you be a mother at this age and also follow your dreams? And Imani Santiago came fully formed into my ear one day and just started talking. And I was so lucky to be able to jot down her story, fast enough. And last thing, the Brotherhood Sister Soul is an incredible organization based in Harlem, New York City. They do a lot of programming around Pan-Africanism and Latinx. I was lucky enough to join the program when I was 12 years old, and they changed my life. They created a poetry program just for me, because I would show up every Friday with poems, and they're like, okay, we're gonna figure this out. And just the empowerment. They took us on college trips. The first, I only visited colleges with them, and that was the experience I had. They nourished the entire child. And so I'm lucky to be able to say I'm an alumni, and I hope if you were moved at all by this talk that you will donate whatever you are able to donate to the organization, which is trying to expand. They recently just tore down the brownstone where they used to be in and are building a massive facility to be able to deal with the farmers market they've developed, to be able to deal with the tech programs that they're doing, to be able to deal with the chapters that they're doing about gender and power, and really encouraging young people to be their best self. So all of that to say, donate to them. Thank you so much for being here. Carla, thank you so much for jumping in. And I hope that you all have a wonderful, wonderful academic year. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla. Thank you, Elizabeth. Just before you go, and I'll talk to the rest of you in a second, but just before Elizabeth, before you go, because I know, you know, we do things in our lives and we don't always hear back how it's impacted people. So first of all, Twitter is full of things like tears, people saying that it's the most inspiring keynote morning they've ever experienced ever, was literally one quote. We also, so just to name a few places around the world that have tuned in this morning, hello to Canada, Panama, Colombia, South Africa, hi Hong Kong, hi Dominican Republic, hi Costa Rica, hi Kuwait, hi Guatemala, hi Brazil, Qatar, Mexico, Japan, Bangladesh, Cambodia, Thailand, Philippines. I could go on and on. Indonesia.
Amazing, amazing.
You've touched our hearts with your words and with your passion for children and your really practical ways that we can do this in the classroom too. I mean, so many of us are like, she's a teacher. Like that's for sure. So yeah, Carla's like, yes, 100%. So thank you for sharing your work with us this morning. It's so inspiring.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. I hope you have a great day today.
Thanks
you.
For putting this on. And as you heard from Elizabeth, if you were moved by this morning, and you were, don't pretend that you weren't, we ask that you please pay this joy forward. So if you go to our website and click on the charity tab, you can see the URL right there. Please donate. All of the links go directly to these charities. No money comes through us. They all go directly there. So please donate to Brotherhood and Sister Soul right on their donation page. You also could consider donating to Nourish NC, to the RAIN network, or really to anywhere else that you in your local community would like to pay today's joy that you're feeling forward. The rest of today, you'll get to, I have to announce this. Sorry, back up a second. So as you heard, there's lots of ways that you can connect with Elizabeth's words beyond this morning. You can find her website, acevedowrites.com. There you can also see her tour dates. You can learn about upcoming work that she has. There's a number of her spoken word videos. There you can also find links to purchasing Beast Girl and Other Myths, her chapbook of poems, The Poet X, which if you don't have before today, I know you're going to go grab after today, her novel in verse, and a brand new, the cover was just revealed, I think it was yesterday, out in May with Fire on High. You can pre-order it right now, right this very moment, and you'll have it in your hands as it comes out. So please do join us on Instagram, follow us so you can possibly earn a free seat to our first study series, session 1. And then what I meant to say was all of our sessions today are then choose your own adventure. You can go where you'd like to go, but they're all recorded. So you can come back and watch them again, including this opening session. You can come back and listen again or share with others. So coming up during our session 1, we have 3 workshops. The first is Let's All Get Woke, engaging students in conversations about race. That is workshop number 1. Workshop number 2, Now I See It, video tools for formative assessment and media creation. And then workshop number 3 is for literacy leaders, instructional leadership strategies to support community and learning. Throughout the entire day today, we hope that when you feel moved and inspired and changed, that you go to our charities page and please pay the joy forward. We also would appreciate if you would share on Twitter and on Instagram links to the charity pages, our charities of today. We'd love to see Brotherhood and Sister Soul splashed everywhere and shared with others that you may be learning with today or will in the future. So thank you again to Carla, thank you again to Elizabeth, and thanks to all of you for joining us and all of the work that you do to change your communities, to change yourself, and to change the world we're in. Have a fantastic day, everyone, and we look forward to being connected for the rest of today.